Okay, I'm trying to make a video series on this Type 4 build that I'm doing for a friend of mine. So this is a 2-liter or a 1800 or a 2000, I don't know yet. We'll know when we measure the rod journals what crank it is, but it's a 914 motor. It's fuel injected. I did a video of pulling the cylinder heads apart. We checked for the guides. We had a couple bad guides in there. We took those out, and I'll get that video put up. And then I figured I'd show the process of taking the crank apart, measuring it, and making sure everything's okay. And if it's not okay, then we'll send it out and have it machined to the next size. So I know this is a standard crank. I do know that much. I've already taken the front bearing, the snap ring assembly off the front of the crank just to speed things up and so I wouldn't look so bad. You're going to need some snap ring pliers to get that snap ring off, just like a Type 1. I have 3 pairs. They probably need to go back on the tool truck and get replaced. They have a little perforated pad on them, and when that gets worn down a little bit, the snap ring can be a little tricky. Usually one of these 3 will get it done for me though. The better the quality, the better the results you'll have on the snap ring though. I can't tell you that. We're going to use a gear puller set, and I think it's set up for Type 1 right now. We're going to have to set that up for Type 4. We'll flip this over, and I'll go ahead and do that real quick. This tool, all you do is unscrew the rods and flip this plate over, and it'll pull either gear. And this is a copy of a Berg tool. I do believe this is an MP version, and it seems to be pretty good quality. It's held up for quite some time now. Built quite a few motors and hasn't failed. So, and I do use an impact on it and try to abuse it all the time. So, but that's how that'll go. Once you get your assembly off the hub assembly, I did have to use a puller to get that off. You'll see that they can be rusted on there. It's a wedge mate fit, and that can be difficult to get off. This is a little steering wheel pulling kit that I have. Worked good on that, lined right up, and pulled it off no problem. So we'll go ahead and pull the gear assembly off first and get that out of the way. And some of this will be noisy. We're going to use air and battery powered stuff. We're going to use some air on this and zip this gear off the front. Just like that. This is our main timing gear off the crank. This is our distributor drive gear off the crank. It's brass. And our spacer goes between the 2 gears. And this would be our front main bearing. So we're just going to clean the crank off. When you measure it, you want it to be decently cleaned. If it's got a major oil line in the center of the crank, I usually take a piece of gray Scotch-Brite like this. This is only when you're doing your inspection. This Scotch-Brite has sand in it, and you don't want to use this anywhere on your final assembly. So remember that if you ever use a Scotch-Brite product, it does have little grains in it, and it will get inside your motor. So if you use this, you want to be sure that you clean all your oil passages and make sure that all this is clear. So I try not to use this on any final assembly or final wash. I try to get it clean. I have to measure, and then if it measures good, then I'll go ahead and start the cleaning process. All right, let's take the rods off next. And once we get the rods off, we will measure the journals. I just take a hammer, tap the rod. Normally they'll come apart a little easier than this. There you go. So there you go. You can see bearing doesn't look too bad. Don't know if it was a coated bearing or this is some sort of additive that they're putting into the oil. A lot of times when you add zinc into the oil, it'll make the parts dark like this. But we will be replacing the bearings. And we will resize the rods if we need to. The rods are pretty, this one's still pretty tight though. So we'll leave those all together, and these will get vapor blasted. They don't have any oil passages in them. I don't like to vapor hone or blast anything unless it has a galley plug I can take out and really get the sand out, because although it does have liquid in there, there's sand also, and it can be very hard to get off the engine parts. So I try not to incorporate on anything with any kind of major oil passages unless you can access them to clean them out real well. I'd say we probably got a little oil starvation going on. You can see the discoloration of the bearings. You can smell it. It got a little hot. Maybe the oil was old or contaminated, but you can see the bearings are a little scarred up. Type 4 rod is a pretty beefy piece though. A little more beefy than a Type 1 rod, but very short. And a larger rod journal than a Type 1. So, 2 more to go. I know this is pretty boring, but I've had people tell me that they want to see this part. And I probably won't show you the cleaning process because it's miserable. There's no way to have fun while you're cleaning parts. Unless, of course, you have a nice spray washer. But usually the spray washer doesn't get the cases clean enough, engine cases. I've paid to have one done. My son doesn't like me washing parts anymore, and he made me pay to have a case cleaned, and it didn't come out very well. And they got to be clean. On the race stuff where all the oil galleys are, taken out, you can put one of those cases in the vapor hone or the glass beater and clean up the outside of it. But I try not to do that on a regular basis. You can see this bearing's got a lot of wear on it. We're getting further away from the oil pump now, so. Further you get from the oil pump, usually the worse condition the bearings are in. Normally, if you measure a Volkswagen crank, the rear bearing surface will be have the most wear. It has the clutch mounted back there in the flywheel also, so there's a lot of load on that bearing, but that's the one that usually goes away, the rear main. One more rod, and then we can see what we got here. Alrighty. Another black bearing. We might be using those over though. I know my buddy wanted me to use them over. He just wanted me to put this back together and make it run. But that's never a good idea with a Type 4. You know, if you got it apart, you might as well go ahead and correct everything that needs to be fixed. At least the basic stuff. We had all our valve guides, our exhaust guides were wiped out on the heads, and the bearings aren't looking very great. So, all right, we're going to clean this up a little bit with a rag here, and then we're going to measure the main journals first. Now, I went on the Google and got the dimensions. You can do the same. Or the Samba is a good source. Most people are going to convert from millimeters to inches unless you have calipers that are in millimeters. All my stuff is in inches, and that's what we're going to be using today. So our Type 4 main journal here is typically 60 millimeters if it's standard, if you want the millimeter measurement, or in inches it will be 2.362 for the mains. And the Type 4 rod journal should be 55 millimeters, or in inches it should be 2.165 if it's an 1800. If it's a 2000, it should be a 50 millimeter rod journal, and it should be 1.968. So let's see what we got. And when I do this, I like to hear the gauge squeak a little bit. It's always a good indication that, you know, you gotta, you know, I can feel it. You know, I like a little bit of resistance, but I like to be able to pass the micrometer over the crank. And it's feeling really good. We're gonna measure it on both accesses there. We'll go for the center here. It's really nice. We'll measure the back one. Like I said, this is one that's usually got the wear. And that one's really nice. And then it's dead on factory. So let me put that right there. You guys can look at that. So we're good there. So let's set this up. And I'm going to assume that this is a going to be 1968 on the rods. But we will set our gauge up and see what we have. You can hear that squeak. These are really nice. Like new. So 1968. It's actually got a little bit of wear, or no? Yeah, a little bit of wear. But they're pretty good. I think we'll go with those. It's intolerance. We'll polish it for sure. And I think that'll take care of the crank. The flywheel will get resurfaced, and then we'll check the rods for size. The only thing I haven't, we'll measure the inside circumference here with the dial bore gauge after we torque them back together and make sure they're still round. If the rod's not round, we'll have it resized. That's real important for oil pressure. If the rod's not round, the oil pressure will be no good, no bueno. These are pretty beefy though. You can see they're pretty thick. So usually this side of the rod stays pretty nice. However, the bushing doesn't look very good on these. And you can see this one has a really bad spot right here, right inside there. So we'll have to look at those better once we get these cleaned up. And but we have a standard crank, standard rods, and the crank looks like it's going to be okay to be cleaned up and put back in service. And the only other thing we'll have to do is the flywheel next. So we'll get the flywheel and we'll get that off to the machine shop and have that resurfaced. And that'll be it for the Type 4 as far as machine work. The case looks really good. As far as the piston cylinders go, I think we're going to go with new ones on those. We have our cylinder heads right over here. They're waiting for valve guides. I got the valve guides out of this one. I did not record that, so I'll probably make a video on how to take the valve guides out. But if you take the valve guides out and put new guides in, you do have to machine it. Actually do a valve job to re-index the seat. It is located to the guide. So that's something to think about. You can't just lap that in. And this is what we use for that. I have this machine here that I just bought, which is a pretty, this is a Kiwi. Not a bad machine, a little small. And then I have my Sue over here that I really like. It's got stuff piled on it, and we'll clean that off and get everything resurfaced. And then yeah, so we do it. You know, we'll take it apart. These are some parts that I've been trying to catalog and accumulate since parts are getting hard to get, and get them in here, clean them up, and tag and bag everything. But anyway, that's what's going on with the Type 4. I want to stay focused on this, don't want to get too sidetracked. And we're going to do a little overview of what we used here. We got our measurements off to Google, so that was my resource for our measurements. We measured in inches. We used a 14 millimeter socket to remove the rod nuts. You're going to need the snap ring pliers to get that snap ring off. And we had to have the puller to get the front hub assembly off for the fan. And that's where we're at. So that's the tools that you'll need. And that's how you measure it and make sure your crank is okay to use again. If we would have had an issue here, we'd have to send this out and they would machine at 10 thousandths. And we would be back in service. So anyway, that's that. I'm going to turn this off now. It's a pretty long video. Hope you guys enjoy this. Not too long. Maybe somebody will get a little use out of it. And if nothing else, we can use it to document the build.